Hey, how's it going? Jambre here. We're going to be reviewing some more Hearthstone cards today from the new set of Saviours of Uldum. First up, we got a Shaman AoE Earthquake. 7 mana, deal 5 damage to all minions, and then deal 2 damage to all minions. So this is a great AoE. Kind of reminds me a bit like Psychic Scream with the mana cost and the fact they can kind of deal with Death Rattle boards. Right now in the meta, there's a lot of 1 health token Death Rattles from things like Snip Snap, a lot of the mech decks, etc., etc. And this 2 damage AoE is going to be great against them. Additionally, there's going to be a bunch of reborn cards coming with this expansion, which bring back a minion on 1 HP. So this Earthquake's going to be great at dealing with them. Control Shaman right now has access to Hag the Scheme, which is a really good AoE, provided you get it in the mulligan. It's a bit bad later on in the top deck war. When you're facing a Control Shaman, you can usually expect them to have 1 big Hag the Scheme at least, maybe 2 if they're lucky. But beyond that, they don't have many great AoEs after that. And they also have a really tough time dealing with big boards like Mage generates with Giants. While this card can't kill Giants on its own, it only does 7 to it. You could see Control Shamans potentially pairing this card with a Beaked Lightning. So you can go Earthquake Beaked Lightning to destroy a big Conjured Giants board from a Mage, which is something they haven't had access to do so far. In terms of Control Shaman, it's not very popular right now. It does have enough tools to either swing your deck into favors against like warrior decks. You can put enough value in for them. You can put enough anti-aggro for some of the more aggressive decks, and you can do okay against them. It's not great in either one, but it does really suffer against mages particularly. And this card I think will help, even though it doesn't kill giants on its own. Other than that, this is potentially a great card to get off Ethereal Lackey. It's just another out to wrestle back onto board if you've fallen behind. Just play a Lackey, pick this card, and then reset the board and go from there. Overall, a pretty strong card. Definitely will see play if Control Shaman is viable. I don't think it will go into any other archetype of Shaman. Next, we have another Shaman card, which is on the more aggressive side. Weaponised Wasp. This is a 3 mana 3/3 battlecry. If you control a Lackey, deal 3 damage. We've already seen some battlecry support in the form of the quest, and I think this card slots very nicely into the deck. If you saw my last video, I was talking about how I anticipate that battlecry shaman to be more of a Lackey focused deck, and this fits right into that. If you're going to be generating a lot of Lackeys, this is an insane tempo tool. Kind of reminds me of Flanking Strike. You can play your Lackey plus this on turn 4, and it's similar to Flanking Strike, obviously a bit stronger, and it can go face. So definitely a strong card. It is conditional, mind you. So like if you're top decking, this is a pretty bad top deck to get. I also think even if you don't control a Lackey, I think maybe it counts towards your quest. Like, it's still a battle cry even though it doesn't do anything. So even if you're playing this as a 3 mana 3/3, you might be able to contribute to your quest anyway. Given you're going to be probably running 2 copies of the 3 Lackey generators, and there might even be another neutral Lackey generator in the set, I think this card will definitely find a home. It's incredibly powerful. You can be going to face. If you've played your quest already, you can do something crazy like Hero Power, and then do the damage Lackey, and then this, and then you've done 10 damage to face for only 6 mana, which is absolutely insane. So yeah, definitely expect this card to see a bunch of play in Battlecry Shaman. It might be a way to see it in sort of an aggressive Doomhammer deck. If that deck just naturally runs enough Lackeys anyway, this card just might be aggressive enough to see play in that. But I'm a bit hesitant on that front. Next up, we have Imp Barming, a Warlock card. 4 mana, destroy a minion, shuffle 3 worthless imps into your deck. Right. So this is fairly similar to Blast Crystal Potion, which saw play in Reno Warlock specifically, but not much else. The downside of that is you lose a mana crystal, so playing it early was really, really bad. The downside of this is you shuffle 3 1/1s into your deck, which are terrible draws. Warlock has a lot of weaknesses right now. Something this can plug up is a weakness to Mage. Right now, if they play giants and stuff, you kind of have a bit of a problem dealing with them. You can play stuff like Voodoo Doll, Mortal Coil. That's a 2-card combo. This is only 1 card. Later on, you can play Twisting Never to deal with it, but sometimes it's a bit too late. So this definitely at least bridges the gap between when they play the giants and Twisting Never. You can deal with it with Embalming. At the very least, if you're a mage and you know that your opponent plays this card, you might be a bit hesitant to just drop a naked giant onto the board, which is actually a big plus for you as the Warlock, because you're going to be able to get to your later turns a lot easier. How bad's the downside? Is pretty bad. Drawing a 1-mana 1/1 in the late game is awful. It's pretty much like skipping your draw turn almost. There might be synergies with worthless imps yet to be revealed in the set. We'll have to see. Warlock does have a hero power, which allows them to draw a lot of cards anyway, so it's probably less of a problem in Warlock than other classes. You could potentially somewhat negate the downside of this card using Archvillain Refarm. Some people say, oh, it's an upside because you get more cards in your deck, but you never really run out of cards with Refarm. The game just finishes way before Fatigue, so getting extra legendaries into your deck doesn't really matter, but transforming the imps into legendaries does. Refarm currently is not very good. I talked a little bit in my last video about Plot Twist Warlock working with Refarm. That is something that could potentially happen. I still think like there are better late game options for Warlock in the form of a Mega Agent rather than going for Refarm strategies. But we'll see what happens in the new set. An upside to this card is that it does delay your fatigue if you're going down that route. There's other ways to do that in Warlock as well, but this way, Embalming is a good card that you probably want to be running regardless, and the anti-fatigue is a potential upside in some of those grindy matchups. If you're playing against Bomb Warrior, you have to tap a lot, your life total gets low, and you start becoming very likely to draw bombs, and your life total is too low to survive the bombs. Embalming, you play that towards the end, maybe in the mid game, after they've shuffled their bombs, and it's just less likely that you draw those bombs because you've got extra cards in your deck. I think 4-mana destroy a minion, you can kind of compare it to Walk the Plank in Rogue. This is obviously less conditional, but Warlock doesn't have as strong removal options as Rogue does. Rogue, it has access to sap, it has access to a lot of board control through their lackeys and things, so having single target removal in Walk the Plank isn't as necessary in Rogue. I think if Warlock had access to Walk the Plank, they would definitely be playing that in their control variants. So having a 4-mana similar version of it is probably a lot stronger in Warlock than it is in other classes. I expect this card to be good. It's just a question of whether control style or slower style Warlocks make a comeback, because if they don't, this card won't see play. Next we have the I always said the Quage Mest. Next we have the Mage quest, Raid the Sky Temple quest. Cast 10 spells. Reward is the Ascendant Scroll, which basically turns your hero power into add a random mage spell to your hand and it costs 2 less. So you're getting basically a kind of free card every turn. You can also bank the card for next turn. Say you've got 2 mana left over on your turn, you want to do something else, you get that discount on the card for your next turn, which is potentially powerful. Casting 10 spells as Mage right now is very, very easy. You have lots of twin spells, you have Mana Cyclone, which generates extra spells, you have Coin, you have Bananas, potentially from Banana Buffoon. So actually completing the quest is very simple, I'd say, for a Mage, and they don't really have to go too out of the way to do it. The only downside is really losing that extra card in the early game and losing an extra mulligan option. They're the downsides for this card. One of the problems with playing this turn 1 in Conjurer's Mage is that you lose 1 hand size. So if it comes to playing a Mountain Giant on turn 4 or 5, it's going to be a lot more difficult. Something you could do to negate that is avoid playing the quest until you have a Cyclone turn. You can say hold on to the quest, and maybe you have you can hold on to the quest and maybe you have Sorcerer's Apprentice and Mana Cyclone. You can play Sorcerer's Apprentice quest, whatever other spells you want to do, and go for a Mana Cyclone. And then you don't really lose the card disadvantage of the quest. You don't have to pay a mana for it. It gives you a random spell in return. It's quite nice doing this because those are the sort of turns where you're going to be spending a lot of spells anyway when you're doing, because you want to play spells for your Cyclone. So putting the quest as well into it is not going to hurt too much because you're not going to be casting that many spells before you do this. One of the downsides of this is that you're kind of less likely to find these swingy turns because you have kept a card in your mulligan, which could have been something else. Like essentially, you've deleted a card that could be one of your key cards in the matchup. So how powerful is the reward itself? Something to note is that you do lose your ping hero power, which is surprisingly powerful. I think if you were to miss it, you'd be a bit sad a lot of the time. Just being able to deal with just a minion on board is nice, or just being able to ping face to try and set up for like Antonitus Fireball Lethals is good as well. I mean, a random spell isn't going to be useful a lot of the time. If you ever play Cyclone and you get a handful of spells, a lot of them are just hot garbage that are never good. This only gets you one spell a turn, and if it's just a complete dud, it's probably just worse than a ping at that point. Currently in Mage right now, you don't really win most matchups through value. It's mostly through huge tempo swings with the giants, and this quest doesn't really help that. There could be potentially matchups where you do want the additional value, maybe against like warriors, for example. This could make it into like a sideboard if you're playing a specialist format and you just have it against warriors. I could see that working and try and go for a grindy matchup against them. In the set, they're releasing Yogg-Saron's Puzzle Box, which is a super high value spell. You're going to get that sometimes from the Ascendant Scroll, which is going to give you a lot of value in these grindy matchups. So like, there's definitely potential to just grind out a warrior with this card. But I don't know if this card is strong enough to make it into just a ladder deck or a main deck. It might just hurt you too much, losing that mulligan option and potentially losing the hand size for giant sometimes. Next up we have Bees for Druid. This card is a 3-mana spell. Choose a minion, summon 4 1/1 bees, then attack it. This card is insane. It's very flexible. Even 3 mana deal 4 is fine. That's a Shadow Bolt, not the worst card. If the minion's got less than 4 health, you summon an extra 1/1 for each health less than 4 it has. You can combo this card with several cards like Floop's Glorious Gloop, which means basically refunds your mana cost, and then anything else you kill on the turn is going to be gaining mana as well. So there's a huge tempo play if you do that. You can pair it with something like a Cult Master and draw 4 cards. If you're doing 7 mana, summon a 4/2, draw 4 cards, deal 4 damage. It kind of reminds you of Ultimate Infestation, which is a little bit scary. Another thing you can do potentially with this card is if you stick a Line Cracker onto the board on turn 7, it's kind of hard to remove because it's got 10 health. You can play bees on it, and because it's your turn when the attacks happen, the overkill effect will trigger on the Line Cracker, and you'll end up with an 80 attack minion ready to attack the opponent's face and deliver a very nice lethal. So I could see potentially some kind of mid-range druid which runs Line Cracker. I mean, the card itself is pretty bad, but it's a bunch of stats. The reason why it's bad now is that the opponent can just ignore it, and it's not threatening enough for them to care about it. Like you get a trade into it, you make it into like a 10 whatever. They're not that sad. They can just freeze it. They can use removal on it, whatever. It's not in any danger of killing you. But if you're going toe to toe with your opponent, and then you turn 7, you just drop a 10 health minion that has to be killed, or you lose the game. That is potentially super powerful. I can definitely see some kind of mid-range druid which runs Line Crackers at the top end, just for that threatening effect. Like, I'm gonna play this minion, deal with it or die. Something to note with the Line Cracker combo is that the opponent doesn't actually have to kill the Line Cracker. They can just deal 6 damage to it, and then you can't exactly play bees on it because the bees will actually kill the Line Cracker. So it might be a little bit easier to deal with than I'm letting on. But other than that, kind of somewhat meme combo that might be good. You know, you've got Knife Juggler, you've got Cult Master, you've got Fluke's Glorious Gloop, you've got so many synergies with this, and I think it's just a good card even without those synergies. Like even in some token style deck, just being able to deal damage to a minion and summon minions for 3 mana is super powerful. Next we have Plague of Madness. This is a rogue spell, 1 mana, each player equips a 2/2 knife with poisonous. So it's super cheap removal, but it's a mirrored effect, so your opponent's going to get it as well. So there's some problems with this card, and there's some super benefits as well. Benefits of this card, it's really good at dealing with like giants and things from Mage. I know I keep going back to Mage, but it is such a cornerstone of the meta right now. Being out 1 mana to kill a Mage giant is like super huge, massive tempo. You do take a bunch of damage doing it, but against Mage that's not super relevant. Downside is you give them a poisonous dagger, which is free tempo for them. They can kill stuff of your side as well. I think in other matchups, this card is kind of bad. Like against a warrior, this card is god awful. Like there's not much for you to use it on against them. Like usually, most of their minions play a guy and kill one of your guys or value trade, or when they have Dr. Boom up, they're all rushing. So all their stuff's likely to be kind of damaged or low health anyway. And if you give Warrior this weapon, he's going to be pretty happy to just get the free tempo and killing your guys. So it's pretty terrible in that matchup. If you're against other tempo decks, like it could be good at killing like Thunderhead and Shaman. Again, giving the weapon to your opponent's not so good. But in Rogue, you don't play that many huge minions. You tend to go quite wide with lackeys and stuff. So at best, they're really killing like 3/3s with this, which is still bad for you, but it's not backbreakingly bad. I think the downsides for this card are too much to just run it without weapon removal as well. Something you see from Warrior when they play Weapons Project is that they pair it with Harrison Jones or Oozes sometimes, mostly Harrison Jones, which gives them a big armor boost, it gives them the weapon, and they draw a bunch of cards, which is fantastic. If you're playing this in Rogue and you get 1 mana for this weapon, and then you draw 2 cards with the Harrison Jones and get rid of the opponent's weapon, you've got a super big tempo advantage from Plague of Madness. You get some value from Jones as well. Yeah, it's pretty good. I think this card's not good enough to play unless you're running a bunch of weapon removal as well. And you only really want to be playing the weapon removal in a weapon meta. So I think this is for sure a very meta-based card. I could see this seeing play though. The difference between this and Weapons Project, specifically for a rogue, is that the tempo of Plague of Madness is way higher than Weapons Project. Like Weapons Project deals 2 damage for 2 mana. This deals with any minion for 1 mana, which is a massive difference. Like even turn 3 playing Plague of Madness plus Ooze and killing their 3-drop is like huge tempo. You kill their 3-drop and you have another removal for their 4-drop or whatever, which is insane to swing. Like compared to Weapons Project, you have just a 2-attack weapon, which can't really kill anything. So like if you can pair this with weapon removal, it is much better than Weapons Project and Warrior. The downside again is if you don't have that weapon removal. In Warrior, they're pretty happy not to play many minions, or at least when they do play the minions, they're always like rushing into something or dealing damage to something when they come into play. They play a guy and remove a guy on the same turn. So they're pretty happy to have an empty board. A lot of the time when they Weapons Project, the opposing side is just using that weapon to swing into face. Another problem with Plague of Madness is that it kind of gets in the way of Rogue's hero power. Like they kind of butt heads with each other. If your opponent's not got something worthy of you using this, it kind of just stays in hand. So I don't think this card sees play in a vacuum, but the tempo swing is pretty big. If we're in a weapon heavy meta where running Harrison Jones and Ooze is somewhat viable, I'd expect this card to see play in addition to them. It just provides massive tempo swings if you have the weapon removal to go with it. Just 1 mana for a poison, 2 charges of a poisonous weapon is just massive tempo. Finally, we have Psychopomp, which is a priest minion, 4 mana, 3/1. Battlecry, summon a random friendly minion that died this game. Give it reborn. Wow. So this is a lot of stats if you can hit on the right minion. So the conditions for this is something has to have died. Given it's a 4-drop, usually the things that have died would be 1-drops through 3-drops. So like playing this on a cleric, you resummon a cleric which has reborn. It's not actually too terrible. It's a little bit easy to deal with. This thing only has 1 health, so you're kind of generating not much attack onto the board. But if you can potentially pair this with like Injured Blade Master, you play Injured Blade Master on turn 3, that dies, and then you follow up with this, you're getting a 4/7, a 3/1, and the 4/7 summons a 4/1 when it dies, which is pretty insane for a 4-drop. Other cards this pairs well with are Death Rattles, particularly Convincing Infiltrator is a good one, which is a 5 mana 2/6 taunt. Destroy random enemy minion as its Death Rattle. If you resummon this thing, it's going to, 1, be really annoying because it's a taunt. It's going to destroy a guy, and then it's going to come back as a 2/1 taunt that also destroys another guy, which is going to be super frustrating to play against if your opponent doesn't have a silence. So your opponent kind of wants to, just drop an Injured Blade Master on turn 3, have it die, and then resummon it with this card. You can counterplay that by not killing the Injured Blade Master. You can have, say, a cheap taunt in the way with not much attack. You could have no minion on your board with 3 or more attacks, so the Injured Blade Master can't kill itself. And then your priest might be having a tough time playing onto curve. It's not always easy to do that, and it's also particularly scary leaving priest minions alive on board because they have punishes through things like extra arms, cleric to heal it up, power word shield, etc, etc. So it definitely plays into priest's strengths in that people like to clear priest minions. Something like Ziliax is very powerful if you resummon it from this card as well. Rush minions in general are quite nice. There's not too many good ones other than Ziliax though. Yeah, I think this card needs to go in some sort of tempo deck where your opponent is very inclined to kill your minions. So either they have taunt, or you're threatening some kind of punish from them leaving your minions alive. Things like Cleric, which I'm sure is going to go into this deck. Things like Divine Spirit in a fire as well. If you have like some sort of mech deck with upgradable frame bot, that sort of thing, they're going to be very inclined to be killing your stuff because of magnetic stuff. But this card just puts a lot of stats which makes it really hard to clear. So you could potentially see a board-centric mech-style priest emerge from this, trying to get a sort of Divine Spirit in a fire finish as well. Basically, you want to put threats down that your opponent has to kill, so you're guaranteed value out of this card. Overall, you don't really need too much stats for this card to be a good tempo play. Even just like a 1-drop or a 3-drop to get resummoned with Reborn, it's probably going to be enough to make this card be good. It just remains to be seen whether a tempo style priest will work out. Like I said, if you're playing against smart players, they're going to disrupt your curve by not killing off high priority targets. So it's going to leave you either passing the turn or having to develop something else. That's it for now. Stay tuned for more reviews. If you haven't seen my first review, go check that out. I'll put the link in the description. Other than that, thanks for watching. You can check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/Jambre. Yeah, see you later.